After the War of the Ring, at the end of the Third Age, Aragorn becomes King Elessar and ruled the reunited kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor for 122 years, bringing in a new era of peace and prosperity. But this triumphant restoration raises a deeply uncomfortable question, first famously posed by George R. R. Martin. Did Aragorn pursue systematic genocide against the orcs, hunting down even the little baby orcs in their little orc cradles? And if you consider this question properly, it leads to an even more troubling realization. Tolkien himself struggled with this exact moral dilemma and deliberately left it unresolved. Well, in this video we will do an in-depth analysis into what actually happened to the orcs after Sauron's death by considering Tolkien's own theological crisis about orc morality and the evidence available from the Return of the King and Tolkien's letters. But before we begin, if you love learning about lore from the Lord of the Rings and other fantasy worlds, then be sure to subscribe to my channel, Fantasy Spark. Around 1954, shortly after publishing The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien realized he had created a fundamental problem in his own mythology. He had made orcs rational, speaking creatures with demonstrable moral awareness, yet expected readers to accept their mass slaughter as morally unproblematic. And in letter 153, Tolkien wrestled explicitly with the nature of orcs, writing that they are fundamentally a race of rational incarnate creatures, though horribly corrupted. Tolkien nearly wrote that orcs were irredeemably bad, but rejected this entirely. If orcs are part of God's creation, then they must possess souls, free will, and moral agency. And to be honest, Tolkien was absolutely correct to struggle with this problem. Because if orcs have souls, then killing them indiscriminately becomes morally equivalent to genocide. And Tolkien was categorical about the proper treatment of non-combat orcs, saying, though of necessity they must be fought with the utmost severity, they must not be dealt with in their own terms of cruelty and treachery. If any orc surrendered and asked for mercy, they must be granted it even at a cost. But surely if Tolkien held such strict moral standards during wartime, what happened to the orcs after the war ended? Well, let's get into it. Firstly, it needs to be clarified that yes, orc babies absolutely do exist in Tolkien's Legendarium. In the Silmarillion, Tolkien explicitly states that orcs multiplied in the manner of children of Ilúvatar, meaning they reproduce sexually like elves and men. And in a letter to Mrs. Munby in 1963, Tolkien confirmed definitively that orc females must have existed. And at that precise moment when readers absorb this information, the moral implications become inescapable. If orcs can reproduce, then orc children, infants, and non-combatants must exist somewhere as well. But the fate of these orc babies during and after the War of the Ring remains one of the great silences in the entire Legendarium. Also, it needs to be highlighted that different regions had vastly different approaches in how to deal with the last few surviving orcs after the War of the Ring. In Mirkwood, the elves under Galadriel and Thranduil cleansed the wood in its entirety, euphemistic language that almost certainly means all discoverable orcs were killed without mercy. In Moria, during the 7th and his dwarf forces retook their homeland and dealt with the remaining orc populations through wholesale elimination. Again, another hint towards complete genocide. Yet for Aragorn's territories, Tolkien wrote in letter 244 that there was much fighting in the early years of Aragorn's reign, with expeditions against enemies in the east. And it is also highlighted that one of Faramir's specific duties as Prince of Ithilien included rehabilitating the lost territory and clearing it of outlaws and orc remnants. The phrase orc remnants is disappointingly vague though, and it could mean only the destruction of scattered orc warbands, or it could encompass something far darker, systematic elimination of any orcs encountered. These possibilities create deeply troubling scenarios that Tolkien never clarified, and perhaps for good reason as well. But there is a glimmer of hope that may lend some validity to the theory that perhaps Aragorn did not kill baby orcs, and that is by looking at how the king treated his human enemies. The Return of the King novel explicitly states that the king pardoned the Easterlings that had given themselves up and sent them away free, and he made peace with the peoples of Harad. These were enemies who had freely chosen to fight for Sauron, arguably far more culpable than orcs who had been enslaved and corrupted for over a millennia. Yet Aragorn's response was mercy and reconciliation. So if Aragorn showed such extraordinary restraint and compassion toward men who chose evil, then it is plausible to assume that greater restraint could also be shown to orcs who never really possessed any genuine freedom, always under the control of one Dark Lord or another. And lastly, it needs to be noted in Tolkien's unfinished sequel, The New Shadow, which is set 100 years after Sauron's fall, orcs have become figures of ancient history that existed only in children's stories and fairy tales. The presence of the orcs in civilized Middle-earth had been completely eliminated and pretty much removed from memory within a single century. How such a formidable enemy could be forgotten outside of a genocide is a question Tolkien never provided any explanation for. So I hope you found this glimpse into Tolkien's greatest unresolved moral dilemma to be interesting and now have a better understanding of the question, did Aragorn kill orc babies? With this being a strong possibility in my eyes, with not even a single orc being left alive in Gondor or Arnor 100 years after Sauron's fall. But let me know in the comments below if you think Aragorn would have shown mercy to the baby orcs or not, and as always, may the light of Erendil shine bright for you and guide your way. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you did enjoy it, please do like and share this video with others, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to my channel Fantasy Spark to learn more about the lore from different fantasy worlds.